I think when most of us hear the name Shakespeare, we think back to a high school classroom, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, while we struggled through reading Romeo and Juliet line by line, wherefore art thou, and all that. And that's a shame, because here's the truth. Shakespeare was never meant to be dissected like a frog under a microscope. His work, in fact, was never meant to be read at all. He meant for his plays to be experienced, to be performed, seen, heard, and felt. Welcome to the Read-Aloud Revival podcast. I'm your host, Sarah Mackenzie. Today, I want to talk about why experiencing Shakespeare with your kids might be one of the most joyful things you ever do together. So let's begin by flipping the way we usually think about Shakespeare on its head. We often think that Shakespeare is a school subject, right? Or that we should read it as part of a rich literature curriculum for our children to be academically well-versed. And listen, it's true that when it comes to passing on a rich literary heritage, Shakespeare's plays are where it's at. But I want to make a case today that Shakespeare is not a subject at all. It's not something you should do in your homeschool to have well-educated kids. I think you should do it because homeschooling is about connection. It's about connection with Christ, connection with each other, and connection with ideas. And Shakespeare is a playground for connections. Besides that, it's just so much fun. I think one of the bigger misconceptions about Shakespeare is that his work should be read. I even recently heard from a fairly well-versed homeschool expert, who shall remain nameless, that watching a Shakespeare play is almost as good as reading it. But no. Shakespeare's plays were never meant to be read. This isn't like Charles Dickens, where he published serial publications distributed around public meeting houses and read aloud every week. No. Dickens was meant to be read. Shakespeare was meant to be performed. Shakespeare's plays were only written down so that actors could perform them. And do you know who filled the Globe Theatre in London 400 years ago? Not scholars, not academics or literary critics, just people. Fishmongers, tailors, bakers, families. They laughed and they cheered and they booed and they wept because Shakespeare understood people. He understood what makes us tick, what we long for, what we fear, what makes us giggle or blush or bristle or weep. He wrapped all of those emotions in the most beautiful, playful, powerful language ever written. I like to say that you don't need to do Shakespeare for academic reasons or for elevating the literary culture in your home. You should just do it because it's so stinking fun. And if you experience Shakespeare with your kids in the way that I want to invite you to do, I can nearly guarantee that these will become impactful, cherished moments of connection for your kids that your kids will take with them and that you will take with you as well. Also, it will boost their academic prowess because Shakespeare's language is literally everywhere, and it'll broaden them culturally because Shakespeare's stories are the bedrock for so many other plays and stories and movies and books that we love today. Your kids' language will also improve because nobody does language like Shakespeare. But above all, you will have so much fun. And honestly, most homeschooling families I know are actually doing okay when it comes to academics. They're doing all right when it comes to creating a culturally rich experience for their kids, giving their kids a great vocabulary. What homeschooling families need is a lot more fun. So, how do we do this? And why on earth am I saying Shakespeare is fun? We'll be unpacking how to do Shakespeare in this life-giving, rich, completely fun and simple way more in the next episode. But today I wanted to invite one of my very favorite Shakespeare people on the face of the planet to the podcast. I'm talking, of course, about Ken Ledwig. He's the author of How to Teach Your Children Shakespeare. He very well may be the most performed playwright of our time. He's had 6 shows on Broadway and London's West End. He's won all kinds of awards. He's a playwright whose plays are performed on stages around the world every single night of the year. And he's also a deep lover of Shakespeare. He's one of those people who helps you fall in love with the thing that he's so in love with, just by nature of his enthusiasm. So without further ado, here's my conversation with Ken Ledwig. Ken, it is always a complete joy to talk to you. Thanks for coming back to the Read-Aloud Revival.
Well, thank you for having me. I always have the most fun ever when I'm talking to you.
I was so delighted when I saw there was a new edition of your book, How to Teach Your Children Shakespeare. Let's tell our listeners who might not be familiar with either edition of the book about it. Do you want to give a little description of what it was and why you wrote it?
Sure, I'd be happy to. I happen to have a copy of it with me here. When my children were, the older was in first grade, she came back and spouting a line of Shakespeare. Hey, Daddy, I know a bank where the wild thyme blows. And I was saying, Olivia, where did that come from? Her teacher was from England, loved Shakespeare, and started teaching the children how to memorize lines from Shakespeare. And at 6 years old, believe it or not, it works because it's like a nursery rhyme, especially if it rhymes. I know a bank where the wild thyme blows, where ox slips and the nodding violet grows. So suddenly in those 2 lines of iambic pentameter, they rhyme, and the children walk back and forth to school saying them, and suddenly they know Shakespeare. And I thought, ooh, what a wonderful opportunity. I love Shakespeare, spent my life in Shakespeare, and here's a chance to start to teach my daughter Shakespeare. And how to teach her Shakespeare? Teach her passages. Teach her these 4 lines. And then explain a little bit about that play we're talking about. That was A Midsummer Night's Dream. Always a good one to start the children with. Maybe a little bit of, usually the comedies, Much Ado About Nothing, As You Like It. So little by little, over years and years and years, Olivia and I would snuggle in bed on Saturdays and Sundays, and we would spend an hour each time learning passages from Shakespeare. And then one day when I was having something else published, my agent at William Morris Endeavor said to me, any other books you have lying around your office? I said, no. He said, I bet you do. So I had written the first chapters of this. He had me send it to him. He loved it. There was an auction among publishers to publish it. It got published, and now it exists. And what it does is it tells parents, it says how to teach your children. It's for parents. It's not for children, in the sense that if you stay one chapter ahead of your children, you can teach them how to recite Shakespeare, passage by passage, what the play means, at an appropriate level. I've chosen passages that they can understand and they can conquer, and you do it with them. And lo and behold, my daughter went away to college knowing 1,000 lines of Shakespeare just off the top of her head.
I love this so much. There's so much here. One piece that I love especially, this is, and you know this, I've told you this before, but this book is my hands down absolute favorite resource for teaching Shakespeare. And most parents who are listening to this podcast probably don't know a lot of Shakespeare themselves, because the way I was taught Shakespeare, it was in high school. We just read a play. I think probably it was either Julius Caesar or Romeo and Juliet. I don't remember. I remember thinking it was boring. I didn't understand it because we just read it like it was a novel, even though it is not a novel. There was no delight. And so we kind of feel out of our depth. Like, how am I supposed to teach Shakespeare if I don't even know it? And I love that the way you've set up and organized and framed everything you teach in the book is exactly like, I don't even know if you have to stay a whole chapter ahead, just a few pages ahead. And you can guide your kids right through. And then you're teaching your kids and you're teaching yourself at the same time.
And I chose enjoyable stories that were age appropriate. The notion that in America, and you weren't the only one, the usual one that got taught in America in young high school students was Julius Caesar. There could not be a worse play to choose of all of Shakespeare's glorious plays. Could not be a worse one, because it's about a bunch of men, older men, all men virtually, a couple small female parts, talking politics in togas. And it's so to this day, I don't know what's going on in it myself. And for decades and decades, maybe 100 years, that's how they taught Shakespeare. That some person got in their mind that was a serious play. Certainly, we've gotten away from that. And the best play to start your children with is A Midsummer Night's Dream. It's set in a magical woods. There's the king and queen of the fairies. There's mischief. It's funny. It's the best.
It's so hilarious. There's so many great lines. There's so many lines that from A Midsummer Night's Dream that we recite just, one of the ones, I know I've said this on the podcast before, so some of our old listeners will probably recognize it, but when we're in a hurry, we'll say, I go, look how I go, swifter than arrow from the Tartar's bow, and this, like, all the kids will say it. We'll say it like, Mom, hurry up, we're going to be late, and then I'll recite it as I'm grabbing the keys, or the kids will do it. It's just fun. There's so much fun. There's playfulness. There is no end of laughter between Puck and Bottom and all of the rude mechanicals. Their whole scenes are just hilarious.
They're hilarious.
It's just so fun. Fun. Something else you mentioned about the way you set up your book is that you're leading with passages. You're leading with the language, really, and then teaching about the story. None of this sounds like sitting like in your high school English class with just the play in front of you, reading it silently to yourself, which I think is how I was taught. Yeah. And I think this speaks so much to your experience as the world-renowned, award-winning playwright that you are. Like, knowing that these words are supposed to be like spoken aloud, recited, memorized, performed, and then set into a story. Memorization is such a key piece of your methodology in how to teach your children Shakespeare. Why is that?
Well, how else can we appreciate Shakespeare in a fun sense, not in an old-fashioned sense, in a fun sense, but memorize a few lines? You used as an example that my family did the same. Going someplace quick, used Puck's line. Puck is the little fairy sprite who works for Oberon. He's his mischievous servant. And Oberon tells him to go find the magic flower. And Puck cries out, I go, see how I go, swifter than arrow from the Tartar's bow. Well, what could be more fun? We all say it together as a family, as you do. And that suddenly brings the play alive. Telling a summary of the play is important later when you want to know what the play is about, as long as it's a short summary. But to just go right in with some of the fun language, Oberon, Puck's master. I know a bank where the wild thyme blows, where ox slips and the nodding violet grows. He's describing the bed of flowers where his wife, Titania, sleeps, because he's going to put a magic spell on her eyes. And when she awakes, she's going to fall in love with the next live creature that she sees. And what does she see? A donkey. So she falls in love with a donkey. What could be more fun? That play is meant to be joyous and full of beautiful, and the language makes it joyous. So you need to put together the language and put together the story, put together pictures of the characters. Get a good book for children on Midsummer Night's Dream, and you see the king and queen of the fairies. You see Bottom. That's the man who's working in the forest. He's just an everyday artisan. And he gets transformed into a donkey. And so he speaks, he loves being with the fairy queen. Well, kids are attracted to this. It's a great, fun, joyous story. Now, Shakespeare wrote 10 comedies, not all of them as magical as A Midsummer Night's Dream, because A Midsummer Night's Dream is set in a magical kingdom. but all of them fun, all of them funny, all of them interesting. In 12th, and Shakespeare always gets your attention right off the bat. Right off the bat in the stories, where do they start? Where does Twelfth Night start? There's a storm at sea, and a ship is going down, and a brother and sister who are identical twins who love each other deeply get separated in the storm. So the girl, whose name is Viola, gets washed up on shore. She looks around and she says, "What country, friend, is this?" "It is Illyria, lady." She says, "My brother, he is in Elysium. Perhaps he is not drowned." The captain says, he says, in a sense, a miracle, that you yourself were saved. And we're off and running. We have a young, vulnerable, beautiful woman who's on shore in a land she's never been on. She's lying there in the sand. The water's lapping against her. She's been in a terrible shipwreck, which begins the play. And she's lost her twin brother, who is her heart. Now, what better story? How can you start a story better than that? Now, what do we want? We want her to find her brother.
Yeah. It's like, this reminds me so much of these experiences where I will go to want to share a story of some kind, Shakespeare or otherwise, with my kids, and they'll kind of be like, usually I think kids don't realize how exciting Shakespeare's plays really are unless you have somebody, like listening to you drop us right into that story makes us go like, oh my gosh, yes, what happens next? That's exactly what we want. This is the same thing we want to give our kids. And this is what I think you do in your book, because you also, one of the things that's really powerful, I think, about the way you set up your book is that you parse lines, basically, like, this is what this line means. I know a bank where the wild time blows. What's a bank? Our kids might not know. We don't usually call they might be thinking of the place they store money.
Right.
So instead, let's tell them what it is. And one of the things I've noticed with my classes at our homeschool co-op is that sometimes we'll doing a reader's theater kind of version of a play, and I'll stop at one point and go, hold on. Do you know what you just said? Especially if the kid recited it in a way that didn't really make sense with what they were saying. Do you know what you just said? And they'll go, no. And I'm like, okay, let's write it out. So I'll write it on the board. I'll be like, okay, let's figure this out. What? And I think it's like unraveling each word. Then they're like, oh my gosh, it's almost like unlocking a mystery. And then they're like, oh my goodness, once in a while, we're doing this class that I'm doing right now. We are doing Much Ado About Nothing. And there are some hilarious lines that as soon as I'm like, do you know what you just said? Can we talk about what Beatrice just said there? Then they're like, oh my goodness. I'm trying to think of one off the top of my head, and of course, I'm drawing a complete blank.
No. The first thing he does after he is tricked into believing that Beatrice is in love with him, his first line, he's then left alone. They put on his friends think he should be in love like everybody else because it's a comedy. And he's always been attracted to Beatrice. His name is Benedict. He's a soldier. He's always been attracted to Benedict. But they're always at each other's throats, just like so many people. Just in high school, when you think a guy's cool, you can't say he's cool, so you bicker a little bit. So they're always bickering with each other. They're bickering. And their friends decide what we're going to do. We love Benedict. And he'd be a pain in the neck, but we still love him. He's our friend. We're going to trick him into thinking that Beatrice loves him, because Beatrice does love him, but we're going to let him hear it. So we're going to go out. The three of us are going to be in the glade. They're waiting for a marriage to happen. We have to pass the time, 2 weeks till the marriage somebody else's marriage happens. And they say, oh, I know what we're going to do. We're going to trick Benedict into thinking that Beatrice is already declared her love for him. So they walk around and they talk loud because they know that Benedict is behind that bush over there reading a book. Well, and one of them says, well, you know, that Benedict, I feel sorry for him. He doesn't realize how much Beatrice loves him. Benedict, who we can see, is like, what? What's going on? She loves me. So after they do this number on him and they're laughing to each other, and then they walk away and they know they've got him. his first line is, "This can be no trick." His first line is, "This can be no trick." And he goes on to say, one of the three of them was a man with gray hair and a beard. Somebody like that would never lie to me.
Yes.
He's an older man. So Shakespeare isn't, you got to cut through what sounds like highfalutin language or language that might frighten you and get down to it. And what does he say? This can be no trick. That old guy would never lie to me.
And then Beatrice comes and says, I bid you come to dinner. He looks at the audience and says, there's a double meaning in that. I bid you come to dinner? Like he's looking for, my goodness, it's such a funny scene. Oh my goodness.
It's so funny. And imagine, lately when I've been talking about Much Ado About Nothing, to talk about the miracle of Shakespeare, I do this. I pick up usually a white piece of paper. Let me do it with a white piece of paper. A white piece of paper. This is a piece of paper that Shakespeare is sitting looking at. Got nothing on it, okay? Up to Shakespeare's time, no one had written romantic comedies. No one had written funny comedies at all. Shakespeare changed the world. So there's no such thing as a romantic comedy. He has to sit with a blank piece of paper and a quill pen. I've got a little mechanical pencil I use. I write longhand. I never type. And he sits with his pen and his ink, and he thinks, what will I write? And he comes up with the idea of the first romantic comedy ever written. He invents that whole genre. That's the genre that Meg Ryan and who's the guy in all the Meg Ryan romantic comedies? Tom Hanks. Tom Hanks and Meg Ryan did a whole series of romantic comedy movies for years. And what we see on TV all the time, the Christmas movies, all of these are romantic comedies. It didn't exist. That genre, that notion of writing a play where two young people, maybe they were in love and now they're in the outs. Maybe they spat all the time. Maybe they think they're in love and one of them walks away from the wedding and gets her. The whole notion of a play around comic characters that are heading towards a wedding didn't exist. It just didn't exist. No one had invented it. He sat down with a piece of paper and he wrote Much Ado About Nothing. And it was the first romantic comedy ever written. And since
I didn't know that.
Yep.
Oh, I didn't even realize it was his first comedy. I guess I should have known that.
It was his first romantic comedy. Wasn't his first comedy. He had written, the older ones were Love's Like Midsummer Night's Dream was an early. The early comedies are Taming of the Shrew, Love's Labor's Lost, Merry Wives of Windsor. And then he starts getting into his real center cut comedies, which starts with Midsummer Night's Dream, and then what are called his three high comedies, which are Twelfth Night, As You Like It, and Much Ado About Nothing.
Okay.
Each one very different. So he invents this whole form out of his head, out of his noodle.
Amazing. I mean, truly. This is one of the plays that you added to the new edition of the book, correct?
It is. It is. The new edition has I wanted them to do a bigger one, but it's a little yellow sticker that they printed on and says, now with 2 new chapters.
Okay.
And what happened was, it sells enough that they said, hey, we want to do a new edition of it. Would you write a couple more chapters? The way things print, we have enough room for 2 more chapters. If we don't spend more money, maybe they'll do it again. And I said, sure. And I hadn't done Much Ado About Nothing in the first edition. So I said, oh, good. Let's do my favorite comedy.
So we're talking about all of this language, giving this incredible language to our kids, delightful language. What do you think is the importance of giving that beautiful, complex language to kids? Even if they don't understand all of it, or even if we have to explain it to them, just tell me why it matters, maybe.
Well, it matters because it teaches us to speak with a certain articulation with intelligence, not just say, did you have a good time at the party? Yeah, man, it was great. It was good. Yeah, it was great. I had a good time. I had a good time. I had a great time. You start to think about how you're speaking and conveying a more complex sense of things. So let me just go right to the new chapter about Much Ado About Nothing.
Okay.
He's sitting It's passage 26. It's towards the end of the book. It's the 2 new chapters I wrote. He's sitting around and he knows that his best friend Claudio is about to get married. That's the wedding that's going to happen in the story. And he's just musing. And let me read you the first 2 or 3 lines. He says, I do much wonder that one man, seeing how much another man is a fool when he dedicates his behavior to love, will, after he hath laughed at such shallow follies in others, become the argument of his own scorn by falling in love. That's the opening sentence. So it's complicated, but it's worth the time. And that I talk about it in the book, word by word. What does each word mean? I do much wonder that one man, he says, I don't understand. Why does one man, when he sees other men falling in love and becoming becoming such fools for falling in love? Because he's a man who said, I'm never going to marry. I'm never going to fall in love. Just like Tom Hanks would do in one of those Meg Ryan movies. You're not catching me. I'm back going to be a bachelor all my life. So, and that's what Benedict does. He says, I do much wonder that one man, seeing how much another man is a fool when he dedicates his behavior to love. Wait, when you're standing there and you see your friend make a fool of himself over love, oh, I'm going to buy her chocolates. Oh, we're going to go to the movies. I wonder if she'll hold hands with me. I wonder if, oh my gosh, maybe this will be the night I kiss him. Oh, you're making such a fool. And because Benedict says, I'll never do that. I'll never make a fool of myself. And of course, what happens in the course of the play? He falls head over heels for Beatrice, and he does it because he's fooled into it by his friends. Yeah, and he overhears them talking. So it's got a great plot. What a great plot.
Yeah.
So the opening lines of this soliloquy, which is the one I suggest people learn, and even if you learn just the first sentence of it, I do much wonder that one man, seeing how much another man is a fool when he dedicates his behavior to love, and then he goes, after he's laughed at such shallow follies in others, after he's laughed at such nonsense by someone else, will become the argument of his own scorn. Will become just that way, that you're laughing at that guy, the argument of his own scorn. I scorn that guy who falls in love. Why would I become the argument of my own scorn by falling in love? And then he finishes it with falling in love. And such a man is Claudio. And then he does this marvelous extended metaphor. So as you teach your children, as they get older, they say, what is a metaphor? A metaphor is when something is like something else. A metaphor and a simile, or sometimes either use the word as or like. So he says, I have known when there was no music with him, but the drum and the fife. What does he mean by that? He means, I've known when all he cared about was military music. The drum and the fife are military music. That's when drummers are drumming in military form, and a fife is what you play. It's like a short little sideways flute. You're hearing Colonial Williamsburg. Those are military instruments. Those are instruments you play when you're a soldier. And he says, I have known when there was no music in him but the drum and the fife. So he's using those as metaphors. And now he rather hear the tabor and the pipe. Now he'd rather hear little flutes playing and violins playing. Oh, because the sweet little guy has fallen in love. So he's making fun of his friend Claudio for getting married in a week's time.
Which is pretty funny, too, because this is one of those instances where I think Shakespeare actually gives us the whole plot in this really sideways, like early hints at it. Like pretty much it's all in there in those lines of Benedict. This is exactly what's going to happen to Benedict in a minute.
It's so ironic.
Yeah.
It's so much fun.
I think one of the things, so I'm reading David Copperfield to my 11-year-old twins and my 13-year-old right now. And we're reading an abridged version in case anybody out there is like, isn't that going to take you half a century? It is an abridged version I got from a London bookshop that is exquisite. I'll put it in the show notes. But it was so funny because we are not that far into it. We're on our way home from homeschool co-op the other day. One of the kids in the back was complaining about something. I don't remember what they were complaining about. And I'm just listening. I'm driving. And one of the 11-year-old twins, Beckett, goes, I'm a lone lord creature. I'm a lone lord creature. I'm going to say this wrong. I'm a lone lord creature. Everybody feels things more than I do. Or I feel things more than everybody does. Or whatever the line is that Mrs. Who is it? Mrs. Gummidge. Am I saying that right?
Yeah.
I feel like I'm not. But yeah, okay. Yeah. Mrs. Gummidge just says, when she's just constantly like the victim and feels so sorry for herself. And she's always like, I'm a forlorn creature. Right. It was so funny. He says this out of nowhere. And it was like, everybody started laughing. And it was so much better than any of us calling out the other kid being like, could you stop whining for a minute? Could you stop complaining? And
that's what literature does.
Yeah, that's right. And nobody does language better than Shakespeare. So then when we do it with Shakespeare, it's like it's just extra. I know a lot of homeschoolers, I think, want to do Shakespeare with their kids because they understand this is a part of like our literary heritage. I don't think most people understand, myself included, even know the extent to which Shakespeare's plays have impacted storytelling ever since.
Everything. Jane Austen does not exist without Shakespeare. She worshipped Shakespeare. She draws language from him. She draws stories from him. All the things that we love that are easier to digest come from Shakespeare. Nobody knew Shakespeare as well as Charles Dickens. Your Great Expectations and all these great stories come from him. And what I try to do in the book, I'm not trying to advertise the book, but what I'm saying is find something like this book. If this isn't the one for you, but that
this is the only one that's like it. But
it's got to do this. It's got to. You need to memorize a few lines because then you start to hear how it sounds, and it becomes very real to you. Even if it's as well known as to be or not to be, that is the question. Or, oh, what light through yonder window breaks. Whatever you learn, memorize it and make sure you understand what each word means. That's the other half of the equation. Don't just learn it by rote. Make sure you know what each word means. I do much wonder that one man means I'm confused. I wonder. I don't understand why one man. That's what he's saying. I don't understand. I'm surprised that one man. I do much wonder that one man, seeing how much another man is a fool, when he dedicates his behaviors to love, maybe dedicates holds you up. Maybe you say, what do you mean? But dedicates his behavior to love. When he acts like he's in love. Dedicates means absorbs, becomes. When he acts like he's in love. I don't understand, he says. I don't understand one man when he sees how other people act when they're in love. They do these silly things. They're instead of playing military instruments, they're playing little fiddles and swooning. Oh, I have known when he would have walked 10 miles to see a good armor. I know when he'd have walked 10 miles up the hill to see a good armor plate on a knight. I've known when he would walk 10 miles to see good armor, and now will he lie 10 nights awake, carving the fashion of a new doublet, meaning in his mind, lying awake in bed, carving the fashion of a new doublet, imagining what a new beautiful a suit. A doublet is the jacket of a suit. What my new jacket would look like when a girl sees it. Oh, maybe it'll have a little gold braid on it. Maybe it'll be fancy. She'll be attracted to me because maybe it's a little tight in the body so that she can see my muscles. So he's saying, I used to know when you'd walk 10 miles to see a good piece of armor. Now you're lying awake at night dreaming of how you're going to look for this woman. What happened to you?
That's right.
And if you take each one of those little bits of the speech and say, well, he's just saying, you've become a love monster. What happened to you?
What is just about to happen to you, Benedict?
It's just about to happen to Benedict. And that's what's so great.
Yeah, I feel like one of the things that I can appreciate now about Shakespeare's plays that maybe I didn't before reading your book was that it feels like even over just a handful of his plays, we get all of the biggest emotion, let me think, like I was gonna say the biggest emotions, but we have like tremendous themes of like fear, revenge, justice, love, like all kinds of, and it's all clothed in this language that's really beautiful. But as our kids are growing and as they go through the teen years and they're feeling really big emotions, so I feel like it gives them this story where they can see these feelings that they're experiencing of all different kinds: anger, love, justice, revenge. I keep thinking of we just saw Hamlet. Of course, those are in my mind. But
sure.
In Midsummer Night's Dream, there's all other kind of mischief and pride. And but they're clothed in this really beautiful language that I feel like then when we give our kids the chance to recite them, not just read them, but recite them like you're suggesting, it's like they get to try them on in beautiful language. And it feels... I don't know. It feels like there's nothing else quite like it. There's nothing else.
I agree so deeply. And it's not just that the music is beautiful. It is beautiful because it's in a kind of verse that he was just a genius. There was no other writer in the history of the world who was such a genius. But the beauty is part of it, but it's also the complexity of the language that he makes easy and clear. Because when you're thinking a thought, and if you said, it's odd that somebody'd make a fool of himself just because he fell in love. Well, that's sort of what he says in that first sentence. But when he says it, that more complex way is seeing how much another man is a fool when he dedicates his behaviors to love. That's not quite just saying when he falls in love.
Yeah.
Dedicate your behaviors. Suddenly, love has become part of you. It's overwhelmed you. It's become part of who you are. You're now dedicating your whole behavior to love. So the language not just is beautiful, it's complex in a way that tells us more than just simple monosyllables would do. It makes us feel those ideas down in our kishkas. We really understand what he's talking about. And he does it again and again. Oh, what a rogue and peasant slave am I. I have heard that guilty creatures sitting at a play have, by the very cunning of the scene, been struck so to the soul that presently they have proclaimed their malefactions. That's Hamlet. You just saw Hamlet in Stratford. Well, it's different to say, I'm not worth 2 cents. I'd like to kill that Claudius. I'm sure now that he killed my father and left me an orphan, and I loved my father. Now, when I express those things like that, which is sort of paraphrasing, it makes it clear, but it not only lacks the beauty, but it lacks the complexity, lacks the weight. Oh, what a rogue and peasant slave am I. That's a very powerful way to express your feelings of anger and disappointment in yourself that goes down deep. And that's what Shakespeare does all the time.
So if a parent walked up to you at, let's say, like a book signing event or something and said, I already read a lot of good books with my kids. Why should I make sure I also include experiencing Shakespeare? What would your answer be?
The answer is that you can't be a literate person in the English language without knowing Shakespeare. Sometimes you don't even know why that's so. That's not just being highfalutin and being a snob. Jane Austen depended deeply on Shakespeare. When we read when we read Jane Austen, if we don't know what her allusions to Shakespeare are, we're missing some of Jane Austen. Okay. Same with Charles Dickens, same with George Orwell, same with Noel Coward. Say who are the Moss? Same with Toni Morrison, same with all the intelligent people who wrote after Shakespeare, wrote novels, wrote plays, wrote treatises, wrote essays, but especially novels, or wrote history. They are drawing on Shakespeare for their allusions, for their comparisons all the time, because if they're teaching in college, or they're just smart people who are writing books, or they're doing this, they know their Shakespeare. They have to. You're just not. It's the one odd piece of the puzzle that no one else fills. If you don't know Shakespeare, you just don't have that bottom of the English language.
Okay. Yes.
You just can't. You'll never know other things as well.
I also love how much, like, just enjoying Shakespeare with my kids has made them see it otherwise. This completely unrelated TV show we've been watching called When Calls the Heart, which people who are listening to this, some of you I know watch it. It's like this Canadian pioneer historical drama type darling. And they had there was an episode, I was watching it with my kids, there was an episode where one character is matchmaking two other characters. And so in order to get them to fall in love, her plan is to have a love note delivered by this little child into one of their jacket pockets. But of course, the little child who's supposed to deliver the love note puts it in the wrong jacket pocket.
Oh, great.
We're watching this and I am thinking to myself, magnificent, this is such, and Clara, my 13-year-old goes, well, she pauses it and she goes, if that kid isn't Puck, it was so great because she saw the whole, it was, but I didn't have to show it to her. I didn't have to say it. It's like she just saw it. And I think they do over time. The other thing I really appreciate about the way you frame things in your book is I think for a lot of us, we think, okay, I've got to introduce my kids to Shakespeare, so now I've got to do all of Shakespeare. But you just take it at a very relaxed pace of how about we just start with Midsummer Night's Dream, which I always love to start with too. It's my favorite place to start. And then over time, you add in As You Like It, or Much Ado About Nothing, or Romeo and Juliet, or whatever you're going to do. But really, in my kids, I feel like are pretty familiar with a lot of Shakespeare now. And we very rarely do deep dive in or go see more than one particular play a year. But if you think about it over time, that's you'll have especially if you're doing it in this way where you're reciting passages and they really understand the passages, they really understand the story, then they just
It adds up, and it just can start slow. And say your child's mine was 6 because she came back and said that. So how much did she learn in that first 6, 7, 8 years? Maybe 5 lines, 8 lines. What you do, but it felt familiar. And I let her draw the covers of her own books. We had them in 3 ring binders, and she draw pictures of Puck or Shakespeare on the front. I have all of them to this day, and there's about 8 or 10 of them because it was with little dividers in, and we knew we were going to do that. Let's go do the Much Ado passage from this and remind ourselves of that. Let me say that note trick, which is great. You mentioned that one from the Canadian show you just talked about. What's it called? I want to say it now.
When Calls the Heart.
When Calls the Heart.
Yeah.
That is a very specific Shakespeare thing. Yes, Puck does mischief, but Puck makes mistakes. Remember, he puts the magic juice on the eye of the wrong lover.
Yep.
But delivering the wrong note, because there's two notes to the wrong person, is exactly what happens in one of the early comedies called Love's Labour's Lost.
Okay, I'm not familiar with that one. Okay.
One of the lower comic characters named Costard, Costard. There's also a very funny Spaniard in it because he uses his language. Shakespeare loves using funny French and funny Spanish because these are people who have accents. Don Armado and Costard are the lower comic characters, the ones who are silly, as opposed to Barone and the lords and ladies who are funny like Much Ado About Nothing. Okay. It's sort of a combination of Much Ado About Nothing story on the top and these funny characters on the bottom. So the setup for Love's Labour's Lost, the setup of the whole story is that four lords decide we are going to form our own little academe, they call it, meaning we are going to form our own little club. We are not going to talk to women for 3 years. We're not going to think about those things. We are going to study academic subjects. We are going to be pure. And so, well, what's the first thing that happens after they make these vows? The Queen of France and her 3 ladies in waiting, all of whom are beautiful, all of whom are about the same age as these young guys, come to this same town, and the guys are going, uh-oh, we're supposed to not take notice of these gorgeous women who just walked in town. So Barone writes a love letter to one of them, and the King of France writes a love letter to the Queen of France because they're sort of matched. All 4 of them are matched. There's Dumaine, Longueville, Barone, and the King of France. And see, he doesn't want his friends to know. He's breaking the rules. So he gives that note and he hands it to the clown.
Hilarious.
And the clown delivers it to the wrong person. And so they all get to see that Barone broke the rules. And about halfway through, they go, we got to give this up. These girls are too pretty. That's the story.
Hysterical. I had no idea that was the exact. I mean, that's exactly where it came from.
That's the story of Love's Labour's Lost.
Amazing. Ken, I love chatting with you. I absolutely love this book. You know, I love this book. I hope every listener gets a copy. I think every homeschool in America would be better off with this book on its shelves.
I love seeing you. It's been too long. We have to keep this up.
Isn't he wonderful? I could listen to Ken talk about Shakespeare all day. His enthusiasm is contagious, and what I love most is how approachable he makes it all feel. And that's really the heart of it, and the heart of what I hope you take from this episode. When we enjoy Shakespeare with our kids, not as a lesson, not as a subject, not even as an item on our to-do list or a thing in our school day, but as a treat, something amazing happens. We build a shared language in our families. We create inside jokes. We fall in love with words again. We fall in love with some of the greatest stories ever told and ever performed on stage. And most of all, we get to explore stories that have stood the test of time because they speak to something deeply true about being human. In the next episode, I want to dive into the how of all this because it is way simpler and way more fun than you probably think. If you want a little sneak peek at what we're going to be talking about, text the word Shakespeare to the number 33777. Thank you for spending time with me today. I'll be back in 2 weeks. In the meantime, you know what to do. Go make meaningful and lasting connections with your kids through books.